Tuesday, 10th of September is World Suicide Prevention Day. Every 3 years, it has a particular theme developed by the World Health Organization and International Association for Suicide Prevention. From now until 2026, the theme is changing the narrative on suicide with a call to action, start the conversation. Today, I'm joined by two special guests for a vodcast that will help to explore the theme, what it means to them, and their views on suicide prevention as a whole. So I'd like to welcome Craig Payton, who is a health, well-being and safety consultant and public speaker on mental health in the construction industry, along with Darren Barden, whose mantra is saving lives in the construction industry. He's a best-selling author and all-round mental health advocate. Gentlemen, hello. How are we?
Hello, great, thank you.
Good to see you both. I hope I've done you justice with those intros, but I know that from previous conversations that you are much more than that. But you're obviously very modest with what you do as well. So coming to the first question on this, changing the narrative on suicide. Craig, I'm going to come to you first. The three of us all have professional and personal experience of suicide and prevention. So what are your thoughts on changing the narrative on both sides of this?
I think the narrative has to change, Mark. It's got to. This is another year gone, another year's passed us by, and there's still nothing is changing. It's still the same narrative in the construction industry. Men are still being told to man up and just get on with it. I think the sooner we can tackle this at a higher level, the better. As I say, we're 2024. Not long till it's 2025, and if we don't change the narrative in our industry, we'll be having this conversation in another 12 months' time, unfortunately. I think it's about time that the government's really started to take notice with this, because guys like us three were just banging our heads against the wall just now, trying to make a change in the industry.
And I think just to add to that slightly, like you were saying about changing the narrative and starting the conversation, which we'll come on to shortly, and the fact that we're having this conversation year on year, and the three of us are having this conversation again, at what point do you think we'll start to see a form of action that really will start to make a difference? I know we saw, was it last week, the week before, the ONS figures on suicide are the highest they've been for 20 years.
I really think it's disgusting, Mark, if I'm being brutally honest. I think it's the shame of Great Britain is the high rates of suicide, not only in the construction industry, but in modern day. I think we are, especially I speak on behalf of the Scots here, we're a nation of alcoholic drug abusers, and that also contributes to suicide. I think a hell of a lot of work has got to be done here, and it's got to be done at the highest level, because, as we say, the three of us can meet every single year and have that same conversation, but until such times as there's a legislative change or something happens in the industry, nothing will happen. It'll just keep going round in circles.
Darren, on this point, where do you think we are in terms of turning a culture of silence and stigma to one of openness, understanding and support that is stated on the World Health Organization's website?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the silence and the stigma are huge issues, but it's also going to come down to the understanding, and it's, everyone is important to someone, and I think we've all got a role to play within this. So, for example, if one of your workmates is, he's just been a bit different lately, and he's not quite himself, or he's not met in the pub after work where everyone else is meeting, or maybe he's just been a bit quiet in a WhatsApp chat. It's those people that maybe, we talk about the 1 in 4 figure, but there's 3 in 4 to look out for the 1 in 4. So it's those 3 in 4 to have the confidence to ask that question, to say to someone, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? And 90% of the time, the guy's going to go, yeah, I'm fine. Like, everything's all right. Just a few problems at home. And he's taking that next step and asking them again. And if you need to, ask again. And that's really where lives can be saved. there's a huge myth around men not talking. And I alluded to this with you earlier that over 90, I think the figure's 90% of men, male suicides, have spoken to an authority or an organisation in the prior 2 months to taking their own lives. Now, that means men are talking, but they're talking to a broken system. And I know, as I've said to you before, I know this. When I went and I was on the edge of taking my own life to my doctor, he gave me a post-it note with a phone number for Mind written on it. There's a guy that's sitting in front of him who's suicidal, and he gives me a post-it note. So we are talking, we're just not talking to the right people, and we're probably not talking amongst ourselves. So the silence and stigma is something we need to do as an industry within construction and as a society as well.
I particularly like something that you said at the start of your response there, which is everyone matters to someone. And I think at
Yeah,
times we can all feel that nobody cares about us because there's that kind of self-deprecation, self-sabotage that nobody cares about us and we're on our own in this. I'd
I
like to
think,
think that we know that we're not.
I think from that as well, Darren, I mean, everybody saw the COVID pandemic. We all thought that wouldn't it be great if we came out of this worldwide pandemic and everybody was just a bit kinder, whereas it seems to have went the opposite direction. Everybody seems to be very self-centered. I'm okay, so I don't care about anybody else. That's something that I do see on the building sites very, very regularly. A lot of people just say, well, I'm okay, so I don't care about others. And that's a big narrative that we need to
yeah,
change. We do have this nation of still with the rough, tough construction workers that are just going out, working all the hours that God sends, and going home to maybe a broken home, going home to a bottle of vodka, going home to some cocaine. That seems to be but we're not having that discussion at site level because a lot of men are really too scared to put their head above the parapet and admit that they have that issue with alcohol or drugs, which
Well,
can ultimately lead to their suicide.
that leads on nicely to the next question, really. So obviously you've both worked in construction for a long time, and it's no coincidence that therefore this has led to your focus on mental health in the industry. Why is construction so kind of under the microscope as far as mental health and suicide or suicide prevention go? Darren, you're up first on this one.
well, for me, construction sites now, the major sites, I'm not talking necessarily about little domestic construction jobs, but certainly the major sites are the cleanest and safest they've been for many, many years, in fact, probably forever. And that, which is a great thing. But the industry went through a cultural transformation to get that. They had to work so hard. I can remember, guys, not wanting to wear a hard hat on site. And now people forget they've got them on, and actually they're eating in a cafe, and having a cup of coffee in a cafe, still with their hard hat on. So we've got to go through all this transformation. The reason the construction industry is under the spotlight is because 10% of all suicides are from the construction industry. 10%. It's a huge number. You're 10 times more likely to die by suicide in the construction industry than you are by a physical accident because the industry's taken great steps to make sites absolutely safe, as best they can. Stuff does happen, but 10 times more likely to die by suicide than physical accident is a scary prospect. And you're talking about nearly three every working day. People are taking their own lives in the construction industry, and that's why it's under the spotlight. It's a major part of our society. With everything, the impact it has on the knock-on effect.
Craig, I'll be coming to you on this in a moment, but in speaking to Darren a little earlier, I think what I found in the past that the industry is very good at talking amongst itself about this issue, but not the general public. Would you see much value in that general awareness within society of, being for the advantage, I suppose, of the construction industry, that people do get the scale of the problem?
I think that would certainly help. It's always the subject no one wants to talk about, Mark. I think you need to destigmatise the words before we can really get to grips with why people are doing it. We need to be talking to kids in schools about this. We need to be talking to the general public about the way they speak to one another, because we mentioned it earlier on, there is a lot of talk about suicide, and it's probably more prevalent than it has been. Even to think when guys like ourselves were younger, it was always when somebody famous would take their own lives that it was in your face, whereas now
Yeah.
you open up a mobile phone, suicide's there, gambling's there, drugs, alcohol, all the simple things in life. And I think that if we can, because you still hear that committed suicide, you still hear that, oh, he took his own life. Still is that stigma that surrounds it. And I think until we can get into the hearts and minds of the children in the UK, that nothing will change. It's having to have those conversations, and they might not be to everyone's liking, but we need to be able to have those chats. And I have those chats with my kids constantly, just to say, listen, if you aren't okay, please speak to me. My door's always open. Don't feel like you're a burden. Don't feel embarrassed to speak to me. And that's part of what I do is speaking as a guy from Glasgow, just to say, listen, if it can affect me, it can affect anybody, and just to have that courage to speak up, and hopefully it ignites something in somebody that says, maybe I'm drinking too much, and try and stop somebody before they get to where I was in that suicidal state. That's trying to capture somebody
It's been
10 steps
pointed out to
before.
me in the past that to go through the very worst experiences that you can do, and then to turn them into something positive to help others and kind of uh, counsel others on this is so admirable in a sense. But I think we kind of brush that off and we just do it because we see the need to do it. And maybe because we not should be doing it, we don't have a duty to do it. We do have a duty of care to others depending on our situation. But I think it's great that we can feel as though we can do this off the back of what we've experienced
It's,
professionally or
it's
personally, rather.
funny. It's funny, Mark, because when I was speaking to someone a small while ago, I was speaking to somebody and I said, I almost feel like the spokesman for the people that didn't make it, the people that did lose their lives to suicide, the
Yeah,
people that did put themselves to death. And it's given me an extra bit of purpose. Since I said that quote, that comment, it's put things into perspective for me, because somebody needs to speak on behalf of the people that didn't make it through the journey. And that it's good. It puts life into perspective. Certainly gives you more purpose.
it
It's a good
certainly
thing.
does. Coming on to the final question, the other part of the theme for World Suicide Prevention Day is starting the conversation. I know we mentioned this a number of times in this particular conversation already, and we've talked about this a lot down the years for all sorts of reasons. For the two of you, what would your advice be to someone, so A, who wants or needs to have that conversation for the sake of what they're going through, and B, maybe that of the people who will be on the kind of receiving end of that conversation, or the one who's in a position of needing to support the other, who wants to pick up on that first?
For me, I think it's about the understanding and having the confidence to approach the subject with someone. So there's a free training out there by the Zero Suicide Alliance, ZSA training. Go on there, and it's about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I think, the training, and it just shows you and talks you through how you can approach someone who's been struggling if you've got concerns about someone. And once you've done that training, to use the word suicide, to ask a direct question takes an awful lot. But once you've done the training and understand the importance of it, I think that's going to absolutely save lives. So I think the simple answer is, if we can get everybody doing a simple training on having the confidence and understanding about asking the question, I think we can start bringing around a cultural transformation.
And for yourself, Craig?
I agree with Darren 100%. I think training and awareness is the major key to this. It's getting, it can't just be about one day every year. It's got to be something that's fresh in everybody's minds, something that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. I think there's a lot of great companies doing great stuff, a lot of great charities doing great stuff, But I think it will need to take the collective, and I have spoken about this before, Mark, is having everybody interlinked so everybody's getting that same training, that same awareness. And I would say if anybody is listening to this, my doctor, it's the same as you, Darren. I went to the doctors and I had a recycled pamphlet for Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, Me personally, I felt the stigma was still there surrounding the Alcoholics Anonymous, but I've heard now a lot of GPs are sending people to Andy Mann's clubs. I would certainly advocate for those guys. I know they do a hell of a lot of great work. And I think for men to hear from other men or women for that matter, if people are suffering, I think it helps to be able to speak to people that have been through the same things that you may be going through, maybe give you some good coping techniques to be able to deal with things. Because for Darren, see me, you're going to try and get a bit of advice from a qualified person that's maybe underfunded, as we know the NHS is. It's important to try and hear what other things are out there for guys to try.
And we do keep meeting new people all the time. I didn't really know the two of you until about 6 months ago. So our own, people come into our lives and they pass through our lives to discuss and develop and build on this kind of stuff and hope to make some kind of difference. So this has just been a short catch up today. I'd like to thank Craig and Darren again for their time, joining us from West Kilbride and Essex, respectively. We've been, as you know, discussing what is such a challenging and important topic in society. And from what you've heard in the last 15 minutes or so, silence can be so costly. There will be details of support organizations in the text in the main body of this post on LinkedIn. Please do share. Please tag as many people in as possible, whether that be individuals or organizations that you think would be interested in this kind of thing. I just want to do a kind of shameless plug, I suppose, for Darren. And Craig, you might want to come in on this at some point. When I said that Darren was a best-selling author, the name of his book is called Let's Skip to the Good Bits. So I thought I'd flag that up for him. Craig, is there anything from what you do that you'd like me to flag up?
I would just like to flag up the fact that it's okay not to be okay. And if someone is really feeling really down, please speak to somebody. Don't leave it too late. Nothing to plug here. No money to be made from myself. Just speak to someone. And if any of your followers want to speak to me or yourself or Darren, I know our DMs are always open. Just please reach out and speak to somebody.
Thank you both. I hope you found this vodcast informative, and maybe we'll all see you again sometime. Bye for now, and take care.